Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
We do want to keep you updated on what's happening on the economic front and in Washington, D.C. And for that, we go to Michael McKee, International Economics and Policy Correspondent, who's in D.C. And the IMF just released its lowered forecast for world growth this year and next, citing the risk of a global trade war. Also saying, Mike, the possibility of recession in the U.S. is rising to 40% from 27% in October. What else did we learn?
Well, Alex, the World Economic Outlook is rather cloudy indeed, according to the World Economic Outlook. Basically, the IMF had to retool all of their forecasts that were underway when Donald Trump announced his tariffs on April 2nd. And so since then, they've come up with a couple of different scenarios because we don't know what exactly he's going to do. But the one they're using is one they call the reference scenario. And it is that the global growth rate will fall by 0.5 percentage point this year. But inflation won't rise as much because global slowdown will mean that price pressures ease a little bit. That's for the whole world. For the United States, it's much grimmer. We will grow just 1.5% this year. That's almost a full percentage point less than had been forecast just 2 months ago by the IMF. And the inflation rate will rise to 3% as unemployment rises above 4%. So the U.S. outlook is not particularly good. And all of this they blame on tariffs.
So, Mike, that's kind of where I wanted to go here. I mean, it does feel like a switch was thrown, 3 months ago where we were in a decent economic outlook, GDP, growing in a 3% range on a real basis, inflation probably still a little higher than the Fed liked it, but, 2.5%, stock market at all-time high. Is the IMF, are they ascribing, as you mentioned, the majority or all of their cuts to this uncertainty surrounding tariffs?
Yes, and to modeling out the tariffs themselves and what impact they might have, of course, they have to just sort of pick a level of tariffs and try to come up with an estimate for what that might mean since we don't have those numbers. But basically, they're working off what the administration had announced in early April. And it's just an across-the-board drop in economic activity, GDP, markets, everything. And, of course, as you mentioned, they do put a lot of weight not just on the financial cost, but on the cost of uncertainty.
What areas through the IMF's forecast were maybe the least affected by all of this?
Interestingly, of the major economies, Great Britain is the least affected. They don't see really any change in growth for the UK. They forecast 1.7%. That's down just 0.1%. And they don't see any change in UK inflation, 3.1%, or unemployment, 4.5%, largely because the Trump administration didn't really put much in terms of tariffs on the UK, just the 10% universal tariff. So they got off a little bit easier than other countries. The Eurozone sees a decline in growth of 0.5% to just 0.7% this year.
Hey, Mike, does the IMF opine at all on the duration of tariffs? A lot of folks are saying, hey, if President Trump backs off or waters down some of these tariffs like he oftentimes does when push comes to shove, or he delays them, that maybe the impact won't be as bad. Can the IMF even model that out?
Well, they try in the sense that they're doing a couple of different scenarios, and they do a lighter tariff regime. And so, which would mean that the impacts are lower. There's still an impact, but they're lower than the referenced forecast. But they make no predictions about how likely any of these are going to be.
When we take a look at other areas of the global economy, what did the IMF say on China?
Well, that's really interesting, Alex, because the Chinese take a big hit. Growth of just 3.2%, down 1.3% from their January forecast. That would be the lowest growth rate in China in decades. The Chinese government is aiming at 5% this year, so it could be a big hit to the Chinese in terms of inflation. They think they'll be flat. That's maybe the best case scenario for China in this situation. A lot of people think they would experience disinflation, if not deflation.
Mike, we're going to get some economic data this week, initial jobless claims. I mean, what are you looking at this week to try to see those initial signs of economic impact in the what we like to call the hard data?
Well, you'd be looking at things like jobless claims, which haven't moved at all. They've actually come down some, so it doesn't look like companies are letting people go. But this is a kind of a different scenario because we're in an environment coming out of the pandemic where companies couldn't find workers, so they are more reluctant to let people go, more reluctant to adjust in the face of a potential recession than they might have been in the past. Next week we'll get the March jobs report and the April jobs report, rather, and that will give us some indication in the unemployment and labor force numbers of what's going on. If immigration, illegal or otherwise, has basically fallen to zero, the labor force won't grow. It should probably shrink. And so that's something to keep an eye on as well.
All right, Mike, super appreciated down in D.C. there. Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Correspondent.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Alix, Paul Sweeney. We're live here at New Jersey Institute of Technology. That's NJIT to the cool kids. I'm going to stop by the store and get some swag, I think.
Okay.
The sweatshirts.
For the whole team? Or?
Yeah. Oh, no, I think I'm just me. Maybe get a sticker for the car.
Harsh, man.
Yeah, we're here in Newark, New Jersey, and some smart people here doing some really smart research, and we have one of them next. Wunmi Sadik, Distinguished Professor, Chemistry and Environmental Science here at NJIT. Wunmi, talk to us about what you're working on in terms of your research here. I see the BioSmart Center. That sounds pretty cool. What are you guys doing at the BioSmart Center?
Thank you so much for having me. At the BioSmart Center, our goal is to look for sustainable materials in terms of chemistry to create technologies that will help people. One of our technologies actually to detect pain. Over 100 U.S. adults live with chronic pain. And more than 10 million individuals struggle with prescription medications. But every time you go to the hospital, and the clinicians, physicians are required to measure pain. And the only way we do that, despite advancement, is to show you a facial scale.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
They wear on the scale, like what faces are you right now?
Exactly.
So what would your research be able to do?
So basically my research says pain is biochemical in nature. And when you have chronic pain, there's a lot of inflammation. And when there's inflammation, there are chemicals, there are biochemicals that are produced by the body. By measuring, first of all, by knowing those biochemicals and measuring how much they are, we can relate this to pain that people are feeling. And so you won't need the subjective approach to measure pain. Because if you have infants, for example, if you have elderly, if you have people who are unconscious, they're not able to articulate their pain. And so you can actually use our biosensors, our smart biosensors, to give you the level of pain that people are going through.
So where are you in terms of your research these days?
Our sensors that are being used currently, we have collaborators in upstate New York, and they take human blood samples and they measure the levels of molecules called cyclooxygenase 2 or inducible nitrous oxide synthase, and they measure the level. We combine this with artificial intelligence.
There we go.
To be able to give you the exact amount of pain that people are going through. And for the most part, we've been able to link the level that people suggest to the level that we're measuring from our biosensors.
How far are we from like regular doctors and nurses using it in hospitals?
Currently, I mean, we've looked at close to 1,000 individuals, and we're getting 80% accuracy in terms of what people tell you. At the end of the day, pain is also individualistic, right? There are aspects of pain that it depends on individuals. You have
it's tolerance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have saturation. So there are so many other components that will impact it. But in terms of being able to actually test this out, we're doing this already.
So how does doing research at a place like NJIT, how does that work? How do you balance, research with teaching and all that? Because I know most professors have to deal with that across various disciplines.
In actual fact, there's correlation. Because in the classroom, I teach graduate students. I teach them the fundamentals, and then we take it further from the classroom and actually do this in the lab. And so there is a connection between what you do in the classroom, what you teach in the classroom, and what you actually do in your lab.
We talk a lot on Bloomberg here about tariff risks, about economic risks, about products being in short supply. Is any of that relevant to the work that you do? Like, are you worried about getting certain materials or products to fund and continue moving your research along?
Certainly, we're going to be affected. Because, as you know, most research at the moment are funded by the federal government. And so if there's less funding, there's less time, they will not be able to support students to be able to do the work. And so ultimately, it will impact our research. It would impact the classroom and what we do.
What's the next step for you in your research? Are you working with a team, other professors, maybe other universities? What's your team look like?
My team at the moment, we have 6 PhD students. We have postdocs. We have clinicians that are working with us. We have computer scientists who are looking at the AI component of our work. So it's a whole center activity.
How did you come to research this particular part? I always find that really fascinating when you narrow it down. The field must be so broad, right? Why measuring pain?
That's a very good. That's a very good question because I have always developed sensors for different things. We develop sensors for the environment. We develop sensors to measure different things. But I had a friend whose daughter was suffering from sickle cell. And and she asked, many times she's in crisis. Physicians are difficult, they cannot really assess whether or not she's in pain. And I thought, well, that should be easy as long as we can find a particular molecule, we can measure that. And I thought somebody should have done that.
It seems so obvious. No, I'm kidding.
But we did. We looked in literature and we realized it's actually none. And this is where we started. The work 15 years ago. And
are doctors, clinicians in the marketplace, are they receptive to your research and what in your products?
Clinicians are receptive. But my own daughter is an anesthesiologist.
Okay.
She's a physician, and she's at Hopkins. And she says, Mommy, if we can find an instrument that would tell us how much pain people are in, this is going to be significant because we get a lot of people coming. They say they're in pain. We're required to treat their pain, but how can we actually assess how much pain they're in? So if somebody says I'm 10 out of 10, who are you to say they're not?
Right. Yep. Interesting.
Well, really great stuff.
Yep.
Congratulations on all of it. We wish you a lot of luck. It seems like an amazing research that you guys wind up doing here. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
That is Professor Wunmi Sadik joining us, NJIT Distinguished Professor of Chemistry and Environmental Science, on measuring pain.
Yep. I never thought about it. I thought it was, again, just a little...
But the inflammation thing, that's so key. I feel like everything wrong with us is inflammation related. But what do I know? She's nodding that I said that. So therefore it must be real.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
All right, let's talk to our next guest here, Tara Alvarez, NJIT Distinguished Professor of Biomedical Engineering, talking about treating vision disorders. I've had a vision disorder since 6th grade. I've had glasses. So
is that a vision disorder, or is that just?
I don't know. Maybe it's just bad eyes.
Is there a distinction?
I don't know.
There's a distinction.
Tara, thank you so much for joining us here at NJIT, your home. Talk to us about the work you're doing. What are you looking at? What's the vision disorders that you guys are looking at?
Thanks so much for having me. And you're right. Glasses is what most people think of when they think about an eye disorder. And if you can imagine, it's very difficult to know what clear vision looks like unless you've been fitted for your first pair of glasses. My expertise is in how the brain brings visual information into the brain, which is the idea of using the eyes as a team to get the information into the brain. And if you don't do that well, you might not even realize you have it, but it can result in problems when doing near work, such as reading, working on your phone, working on computers. And vision therapy works quite well for this condition known as convergence insufficiency, which is the inability of the eyes to work well as a team.
How do you fix that, I guess? Or how do you find it, and then how do you fix it?
Great questions. So vision therapy, which is basically like a form of physical or occupational therapy for your eyes, strengthens the eye muscles and the communication between the brain and the eyes. My work has been funded mostly through the National Institutes of Health, which is very critical in funding research that has direct impact to our society. You can find this by going to an eye doctor, so an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, and they can do an exam. But most people don't even know that they have it, so they don't even realize that this is a problem. So typical problems people can have is they get headaches while reading, they feel like they read slowly, they get blurry vision, double vision, and it takes them much longer. So it's not that they have a cognitive or a problem in learning, it's that they're struggling to get the visual information into the brain.
How common is this affliction or this issue?
So depending on how you do the diagnosis, it's present in between 4 and 12%, so you can say roughly 8% of the population.
You mentioned the funding. What's your level of confidence that funding for this kind of study will stay?
I'm unclear right now. So right now we have I'm on my second randomized clinical trial where we're concentrating on concussions because we have the CDC released in December of 24 that concussion costs is about $40 billion a year. And if you have had a concussion, especially multiple concussions, you can develop persistent post-concussive symptoms. And out of that population, about half of them have this convergence insufficiency, which is that teaming problem of the eyes. So it is quite common. It's very impactful. My program officer at the National Eye Institute within the National Institutes of Health is extremely excited about our work. And in the past administration, I would have much more confidence that we would have funding to continue this very important work. But it is something I have a lot of concerns about right now.
How often do you get funded, or how often do most researchers get funded? Is this an annual thing?
So typically you get what's called an R01, which is 5 years of funding, and you are reviewed every year.
Okay.
And typically with a randomized clinical trial, which is what I'm leading, that's done in collaboration with Children's Hospital Philadelphia as well as Rutgers, CHOP, yes, and Rutgers University, it takes time because this is a rehabilitation and it's a longitudinal study. And it's also done with Salus University of Drexel. So it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time to acquire this data, but it's really critical because the knowledge that I'm gaining from this study has been patented, where NJIT holds the patents, and that led to our startup company, OculoMotor Technologies. And the key reason I became a biomedical engineer is I want to have a positive impact on others, specifically in the healthcare sector. And it's my children that actually inspired the core technology of our company, which is the idea of trying to do the therapy that works very well, but is incredibly boring. So if you can put the therapy in a virtual reality headset and make it into a game, if you have a child, and mine are almost all grown now, but it's not difficult to get a kid to play a VR game. And in essence, we are sugarcoating the therapy, and they think they're having fun, but in actuality, it's sugarcoating a ton of science to get those eyes to work better together.
It's like when I put kale in the oven.
Correct.
Yeah, it's along those kind of lines. Exactly. So what is the exit strategy for the startup? And did you get outside funding at the same time?
So we have been funded through the NSF, through SBIR, which is the Small Business Investigator Grants. We've had both Phase 1 and Phase 2, and we also participated in an NJIT I-Core program, and we did a national version of I-Core, which is basically teaching professors how to create and translate their science out of the lab and to have a positive impact.
Amazing. We have to leave it there. I'm sorry. We're up against the clock. No, don't leave it yet, quite yet. Thank you so much. We really appreciate Tara Alvarez, NJIT Distinguished Professor, Biomedical Engineering, joining us here at NJIT. I love hearing about all the variety of work. It is truly, truly amazing.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Right now, we're going to get back to some of our speakers here at NJIT. Chao Yan, NJIT alumnus, and he's co-founder and CEO of Princeton NuEnergy, which is a global leader in lithium-ion battery direct recycling.
All right.
I know.
That's not
I learned from he's now 29-year-old engineer son. Back when he was like 12, he explained to me these lithium-ion batteries that were powering his little remote control cars, how serious you have to handle them. You can't just throw them away. And he was 12, and he was schooling me there. So I know this thing. Chao, talk to us about your company. What are you guys trying to do here? Because these batteries are everywhere now.
Yeah, so Princeton NuEnergy, we have a great technology in using plasma to recycle lithium-ion battery with much lower cost, roughly 40-50% lower than the traditional recycling technology, and also much more cleaner compared with the traditional lead-acid leaching process. So that's why recycling technology we need in the U.S. is cleaner and cheaper. So talk about the supply chain for the battery. The biggest problem for the U.S. right now is that the EV is still too expensive. So how we can reduce the cost for the EV is important. So there's more than half of the cost inside the battery, which is they call the cathode active materials. So for direct recycling, our technology is to direct extract those cathode active materials outside from the old batteries that you can reuse. At the same time, we do not want to produce a lot of waste. So in the traditional way, using the sulfuric acid, you leaching all the metals, and though at the end you get a lot of sodium sulfuric, and we don't have the place to dump them right now. So that's why we need a great technology to do that, and which is a much lower cost. So that's what we are doing.
So let's go to the cathode part first. So you're doing that 40% cheaper than competitors? How?
So because the traditional way, you need to break the old batteries down to the element, so using the acid. So we don't destroy the cathode materials, we just fix them, reuse them, so that's how we reduce the cost, and using our plasma technology.
So where are we with just battery technology and recycling? I mean, are there more advances to go here? Because it feels like that's such a key part of electric vehicles and just electric power going forward.
Yeah, so it's not only for the EV, but also like the energy storage batteries. ES is the big the storage system. So traditional technology we're trying to build in the US, but it's very expensive, and the processing cost is also very expensive. So that's why in the US we're trying to scaling up our technology. So the company was founded in 2019, and we have technology, and after that we have the large space lab in New Jersey, which is close to Princeton, and also we have built a pilot production line, which is about 3-4 years ago. Right now it's up running about 2 years which is in Dallas, Texas. And starting from last year, we are building the first commercial scale production line in South Carolina, Chester County. So in this one, we are able to recycle 5,000 tons as a phase one, and we target to expand to 30,000 tons at the end to recycle the batteries.
Do you have to have end buyers that will contract that material for you to feel confident putting in that kind of capex?
Yes, we need that. And
do you have that?
Oh, we do have the feedstock provider, which give us the waste batteries, and it will come from like a cell manufacturers who make the batteries. They are manufacturing scrap, so we do have a contract with them to recycle their manufacturing scrap. We do have a contract with auto OEMs and also the like junkyard players who have a lot of waste batteries. So we also have a contract for that one.
Who's buying them though?
So currently we are selling to the leaching companies who need those batteries to continue to get the metals for the later usage.
How are you funding your company? I'm a former banker, so I always think about the money. How are you funding this company?
That's a very important part. So we closed the 2 rounds of the investment. We call the seed round and A round. So we have private investors who interest with us, invest with us, and supporting us. And those the investors, some of the financial investors, some of strategic investors. So and on top of this, we get a big support from the Department of Energy in the past 6 years, starting from like a smaller grant SBIR. Later on, we have a larger grant. So we got roughly about $20 million supporting us.
What is your level of confidence that that continues?
I think for the United States, critical minerals are very important. So we don't have so many mines in the U.S. What we need is how we can leverage those waste stuff and how to reuse them. So that's why I think recycling technology is critical for us to secure the critical minerals. And this will link to the U.S. energy security. So I think for our technology is very critical for the United States, for the materials what we need, and also for the batteries what we're going to build. So that's what we need. And just to give you a little bit number, so currently U.S. don't produce any cathode materials. So all the materials we import from outside. So direct recycling, we use the waste batteries and produce the cathode materials to make new batteries, and that's contain more than half of the value inside the lithium-ion batteries. So how important is? So that's why we believe the grant will be continue to support this critical minerals research and also the support our energy security.
So you got your master's and your PhD here, right?
That's right, in chemistry department.
That sounds fun. How was your experience here?
It's awesome. I really enjoy the research here. So basically, it's built up my very strong research and the engineering foundation. So I think that will be very critical, because once you move into the next step, so doing research, basically finish PhD, no one gonna teach you how to do it. You need to have very strong the experience how to design your research, how to set up everything, and then after research, how to write a paper and the publications, and more important, how to find the research topics, write the proposals to get a grant. So yeah, I got a pretty good foundation here.
Very good. Good walking advertisement for NJIT for sure. Chao Yan, co-founder and CEO of Princeton NuEnergy, talking about recycling those batteries, which are in the cars and a lot of other places too. No,
it's really amazing. I'm just interested to see, and we've heard from many professors here as well, obviously, with the startup about funding and how important government funding is and how uncertain that path to government funding is as well.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us live on YouTube.
Alix Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio, broadcasting to you live from Newark, New Jersey, NJIT New Jersey Institute of Technology, where they enroll 13,000 students and are really some of the leaders in technology and science within the country. Joining us now here is Eric Fortune, NJIT Associate Professor of Biological Sciences. He recently led a team competing to record the biodiversity in a square kilometer of the Amazon rainforest. And this is after 6-year completion. Your team walked away with a $5 million prize. This is really exciting. Can you walk us through what that was like and how you did it and all that fun stuff?
Well, it's a super exciting project that we were part of. It was sponsored by this group called the X Prize, and their goal is to incentivize fields where otherwise there weren't sufficient finances to drive things. So they feel like they're responsible for the current space exploration that's occurring in the private sector because they sponsored an X Prize 30 years ago that drove that market. So their goal with this X Prize was to drive the same kind of development and innovation in the area of biodiversity. So their rules were that they would give us, a few months ahead of time, a random location in some rainforest on the planet, give us 1 day to sample with only drones and other kinds of remote sensing technologies. No human was allowed to go into this square kilometer, and then 48 hours to analyze the data and provide a report about the biodiversity that we encountered in that time.
What did you find in your findings? What was the I can't think of a more biodiverse area maybe than a rainforest.
Well, we went to perhaps the most biodiverse place on Earth. So this was a habitat in the Amazon rainforest, and so we had a square kilometer just outside of Manaus in Brazil, and so we deployed our drones and these devices that sat on top of the rainforest canopy, and they collected insects and sound and environmental DNA, and we were able to take like 27 million samples of genetic information from the forest, identified more species of birds than exist in all of North America in this one 1 kilometer area, and then measure hundreds of thousands of insects all in this 24-hour period. It's really unprecedented.
So, okay, so you take this, you analyze it, you have a tremendous amount of research, then what?
Then what? Well, that's I think the big problem that X Prize is trying to identify, which is first develop the technology so that we can do this kind of analysis, and then the next steps, the part that we're in now, is to try and develop and address the market for biodiversity monitoring, not only in rainforests and critically important habitats like the Amazon basin, but across the planet.
So what are the next technological frontiers for monitoring?
So we've now developed and tested and proven these technologies. So our goal now is to translate these things into businesses. So our team alone has generated 6 or 7 new businesses that are each focusing on components of this biodiversity monitoring that are entering the market at this moment. And the other teams that we competed with, some of their teams are also generating these new companies that do things like monitoring environmental DNA at a particular location. So if you're building a power plant somewhere along an endangered forest, you want to know what your impacts are. You measure the environmental DNA to know what species were there before and what your impact is on species later.
It's great that we're having this on Earth Day. Do you know it's Earth Day?
I know. It's Earth Day today.
Which is really cool, but I was kind of joking, not joking, with some of my producers being like, do we still care about that? As in, like, was this research much more relevant in certain areas 2 years ago than you could make an argument that is now?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, in one sense, Earth Day is the greatest disappointment ever, right? In that, and also kind of a weird thing to say. Every day we live on Earth, as far as I can tell, mm-hmm. And so what kind of action can we generate here? So obviously, the most important thing is to align market interests along with saving and preserving biodiversity. And lots of companies rely on services provided by nature. And so those companies have already recognized that and already are engaged in saving the habitats on which they rely on. A great example is L'Oreal. This is a company that has a global mission for making sure that the impacts of the products they generate are going to be neutral over the entire lifespan of the product, from production to use and then the discarding of the waste afterwards.
Do you sense changing winds out there in terms of funding, in terms of support for biodiversity and just environment in general?
Well, I mean, it's complicated, of course, with changing political winds, but we all live on this planet, and that's not changing. And I think anyone of our age, and I don't mean to say anything about how old any of us are, but it's inescapable that during your lifetime you have observed changes in climate and in biodiversity that occurs. And so whether we like it or not, this is something that we're going to have to deal with. The question, I think, from a business perspective, of course, is what's the time horizon of that? Is it 1 year, 10 years, 100 years? And that's a complicated thing that I am not equipped to answer.
What's next for you guys?
So I'm personally, I've started a company that came out of this X Prize competition, and so we have our first order, and so I'm busy building these high-tech devices that are deployable into these kinds of habitats that collect this kind of data. And we see that as, at least on a small scale, a sustainable business for quite some time. Anyone who owns land and is interested in the biodiversity there, starting with like national parks or local and city parks or any other business that have large landing holdings, they're going to need over time devices like this to answer regulatory and their customers' demands about biodiversity.
Fascinating stuff. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Eric Fortune, he's Associate Professor of Biological Sciences here at NJIT here in Newark, New Jersey. So we appreciate getting a few minutes of his time.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
All right, Alix Steele, Paul Sweeney. We are live at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, NJIT, in Newark, New Jersey, talking to some really smart people. All right, what are you doing here? I mean, this one, we saved us. Somebody actually does this, a neural engineer and brain stimulation scientist. That is awesome. Put that on a business card.
Yeah.
Elisa Kallioniemi, Assistant Professor, Biomedical Engineering here at NJIT, joins us here. Elisa, what are you guys looking at? What's your research? What are you focusing on these days?
Yeah, so the biggest question in my research is trying to understand how to modulate the brain safely and precisely. So we already know that several brain disorders have like abnormal brain activities. But we don't know what causes them and kind of like how can we normalize them. And that's where brain stimulation comes from. So brain stimulation is a method where we can actually modulate the brain safely.
Modulate the brain.
Does that mean like fix it or change the brain waves, or what does that mean?
So basically it's kind of like the radio. So like with the radio you can fine tune things.
Okay.
So with this one we are applying these like small energy pulses to the brain that are totally safe. And these energy pulses are able to change your brain activity.
Wow.
So give us like a typical example of kind of what you're trying to do with a patient who may have some brain issues. What's an example?
Yeah. So well, for example, considering medications. So medications are life-saving for many individuals, but the challenge is that like some people get side effects, some people don't just like tolerate them, some people just don't get like any response, and obviously that's a problem because then we don't have any treatments for those. So what I'm trying to do with my research is kind of like help those individuals who don't get help from the pharmaceuticals. So with these brain stimulation methods, we kind of like fill that gap and try to help them. So we try to develop methods that we could kind of like whatever problem they have in their brain, we could elevate their symptoms.
Oh, and then in that case, it's sort of customized per person to do that. So, that's amazing. That's like a life-saving thing. You say it's totally safe, but you say electromagnetic pulses in your brain, and you're like, whoa, I don't know, that sounds scary. Give me the pitch for why it's safe.
So basically with these pulses, we can just reach the surface of the brain, and then like your brain is already naturally electrical. So what we're basically doing is that we just like initiate the activity that you would be initiating yourself as well, but we just do it externally, and then whatever was supposed to happen in your brain will happen. So it's kind of like we just initiate the domino effect, so to speak.
Where are you in your research now in terms of maybe getting at some point to practical applications?
So my lab is rather new. So I've been at NJIT only like 2.5 years.
Okay.
So I would say that we're still at the kind of like the first steps. But we already have some industry collaborations. So we've worked with. So there's for example this program NSF I-Course. So that's a program where we collaborate with industry and then kind of like try to kind of like get an idea of where we could help with our research. So I've had a couple of student teams done that, and then, but basically, like everything that we do, the end goal is to help patients. So somehow, because I mean, this is electricity, so obviously, like that's where the engineering comes from. But like, in addition, obviously, we have to understand other fields like neuroscience and clinical things. But like, from my lab's perspective, we're trying to kind of like provide the engineering perspective. So what do you need to do, or what can we do through an engineer's perspective to model, like kind of like improve these methods?
So this could be you could commercialize what you're doing.
So this technology is already commercialized.
Okay.
So it is. So basically, this was invented about 30 years ago. So there are several companies. I believe currently there's like 13 different companies that are developing these methods, and there are FDA-approved treatments. So why we still need research is because like we have this problem that like we know that this works, but we don't really understand the interaction between the brain and the electricity that well. So, okay, we know that it works in this one individual, but then like how do we modify to this second individual? That's the mystery. So we're trying to kind of like find out that what is the, like, what do we have to do? Like, what do we have to change? So currently it's FDA approved for things like depression, OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, and migraines with auras, but everything's like one size fits all. So if you have like, let's say like your genetics somehow different, it's like it might not work for you, but then currently we don't really know why and what should we do.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
All right.
interesting.
Interesting research there for sure. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. Elisa Kallioniemi, Assistant Professor, Biomedical Engineering, NJIT. Got some smart folks here, and we're glad they could spare a few minutes of their time here today.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.